passei um dia sem pensar em ti. Pergunta ao vento se sabe o quanto esperei por ti. Pergunta ao vento se passei um dia sem pensar em ti. Pergunta ao vento se sabe o quanto esperei por ti. Pergunta ao vento se passei um dia sem pensar em ti. Perguntam de onde vens, outros para onde vais. Mas tu já não sabes. Uns perguntam de onde vens, outros para onde vais. Mas tu já não sabes. Há outras vidas, outros tempos deste. Um avião que poderia atravessar. A minha reação quando disseste: és a última coisa em que pensar. Já não sentes um presente onde vivo ao meu e teu, desolado e desobediente, subconsciente. Os teus sentimentos deixaram-se levar pela brisa através dos momentos, enquanto poetiza toda a poesia que leio ao relento. Ouço o timbre da tua linda voz como elemento ao crescimento da minha inspiração, da nossa atração, tão inocente como uma criança. Pergunta ao vento se sabe o quanto esperei por ti. Pergunta ao vento se passei um dia sem pensar em ti. Pergunta ao vento se sabe o quanto esperei por ti. Pergunta ao vento se passei um dia sem pensar em ti. Pergunta ao vento se passei um dia, se passei um dia sem pensar em ti, sem pensar em ti. I just wanna chill. Trying to party all night now. Stress got me going paranoid now. Got no time to fight well now. Being blessed, hey, I'm for yeah. I'm just chilling, got no worries. With the homies, never need to hurry. We're mixing our drinks like it's curry. Oh boy, vision's getting blurry. Yeah, bitch, drink shots and sweat the ditch. Clear fast, live your life.
Welcome to the first FilmEU Summit, live from Fernando Lopes Movie Theatre at Lusófona University in Portugal. FilmEU brings together 4 European higher education institutions: Lusófona University in Portugal, Lucas Schools of Arts in Belgium, AIDT in Ireland, and SFE in Hungary. Today, we welcome as keynote speakers Anna Valtonen from Aalto University in Finland and Maria Silva Gatta from European Commission and DG Communication Networks, Content and Technology, joining us from Belgium. Moderating this conference, we have Manuel José Damasio, FilmEU Coordinator and Head of Film and Media Art Department at Lusófona University.
So, good morning everyone and welcome to this session. We have the pleasure of having with us as keynotes Anna Valtonen from Aalto University and Maria Gatta from the audiovisual area of the European Commission. I hope it will be a very fruitful session. Since we have one keynote present here in the room, we will start with Anna Valtonen, then open for questions and answers on her talk, and then move on to the blended format, and then later open for questions and answers on that part. I would just like to do a little bit of housekeeping on the day today, because we have a very long and intensive day. After this session, we are breaking for lunch. Then at 2 p.m., we are coming back here for the presentation of our pedagogical model that is being implemented under FilmEU. Then we will open the afternoon with a welcome speech by the Secretary of State of Portugal for Audiovisual and Film, and then move on to 3 roundtables on the different challenges that at the level of the industry, academia, and research we are facing in FilmEU. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the day. As for myself, I'm going to turn off the speaker in this computer, or otherwise we'll all go a little bit crazy. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to Anna for being here with us, and I give you the floor. But before that, I'm going to stop the sharing for a second so that I can turn off the volume in this machine. Okay? And that is it. Just give me a second so that I can share the screen again. And here we are. Thank you.
Wonderful, Manuel. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me here to share with you some of the thoughts that we can maybe start off the day with. So I'm Anna Valtonen. I come from Aalto University. And I'll probably start with a confession. I'm not from the field of design or from the field of film. Originally, my background is in design, but I have been involved with the film industries in all sorts of different ways during the year. And maybe I'm hoping that my talk will help you think a little bit beyond just your own work and maybe see a little bit of the larger framework of the cultural industries in general. Let's see how this goes. But, you can please ask and question as much as we are while we're going through this. So let's see how we head forward. So I was asked by Manuel to start thinking about what is the role of cultural and creative sectors in the recovery of a post-COVID Europe. I think we need to start with a question, though. Part of this is really, why is creativity and the cultural sectors relevant now? Because I think we often have this idea of us being a little bit of an underdog or something like that. That's not the question at the moment at all, because I think we're actually in the crucial parts, in the central point of all of this transformation that we're having at the moment. And that's what I'll try to open up a little bit during the day. So the question was about COVID, but I think we have an even larger wave of change coming at us in so many ways. And it's coming. We can either want or choose to surf on it, or we can choose to crash within it. And I think that's really the choice that we're making. Do we want to go with it, to actually be the ones who go the fastest and the furthest, or do we want to sort of stand like the deer in the lights? So of course, COVID has been crucial in this. Society has shown how much it needs to change in many ways during this crisis. But I'd say that that's only the tip of the iceberg. I think there's quite a few other, even larger societal changes that we're facing at the moment. So one of them, of course, that's inevitable at the moment, is the whole challenge of sustainability that we're in. So this, unfortunately, is a picture of the Baltic Sea. You can see that it's not doing very well. It could just as well be the forest fires in Spain or the floods in Central Europe. We all know that this has been touching us quite practically during this time that we have. And it's a big sort of societal challenge to actually take and to tackle. This will actually cause many changes in what we do and how we do it. So we have, of course, the IPCC report from quite recently, looking at all the things that this actually entails and means. My guess is, and I'm sure you can help those of you who know more, this is quite soon going to change or also give us more regulation on what Europe wants to do about this question. We can see all this already happening with the new European Bauhaus. We need to be active and act. The other example there, though, also means that this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for new innovation, for thinking in new ways, in completely new ways of approaching this. And it also means, like the two last books there will show, it's about what do we want to do? And could we actually find new ways of working in these initiatives, in these ways of, they will change how people consume, they will change how people spend their free time, they have already changed how we travel, how we move between each other, how we communicate. So many things will be touched by this. And this, I think, we should see as an opportunity and be active in it rather than responsibly, see it coming at us. The other thing that I think is crucial, particularly to you as an audience, is the whole wave of which we started talking about as digitalization, which was a nice little sort of way of approaching it. But I think it's way bigger than that. It's changing the whole world of work, of how we can automize more and more things. We can have a selection of what do we actually do as humans and what's relevant to do with algorithms, with the data that we have around us. Again, I think it's important that we are active and take a stance on it. So with artificial intelligence, of course, that means that there are so many things that we don't need to do as humans, which are smarter to do in an automated way. But it also means that that's particularly appropriate when we can define what the case is, when we know what the situation is and when we can repeat it. But to me, that's also the opposite of the cultural industry, because we are all about creativity. So I think that with the increased use of AI, it actually means that what it is to be human is really what we have been good at for so long. It's about being able to think in different ways, about being creative, about questioning what things are. Because there's no use in putting time in just repeating things which a machine could do better. I think this is quite crucial in what the role of creative industries will be. So Max Tegmark, who's a Swedish-American researcher, he's written a lot about what this means being human in this world of artificial intelligence. And if you look at the things that he lists that are important for our children of the future, what they should be focusing on, they should look at jobs in the future that one interacts with other humans, uses social intelligence, includes creativity, requires us to look at new solutions, and requires us to work in unpredictable environments. I'd say that this is us, right? This is the very thing that we've been doing all the time, and this is now becoming mainstream. This is what keeps us human in this all change. So, of course, these aren't easy things to tackle. I think many of the challenges that we have at our hands at the moment, we can't give them easy solutions. They're complex, they're moving, they're dynamic, but in getting this systemic approach to them, that's really where we can act and find new ways of doing. So to me, at least, I think it's when we look at these challenges, it's also changing because of the systemic and the things that everything is interconnected and networked. It also changes how we work with it. So I think at the same time, we have a movement in changing organizations going from hierarchical to more networked. We are a great example of that today. I think you are creating the organization of the future. We also have a big debate on how important it is to find different viewpoints, to swim against the stim, if you want to, as a fish, to be the one that questions and that opens up new perspectives. Again, that is us. And the third thing is that we need to find new ways of making sense of the future, of this sense making in the human parts of it. Again, that's what we are good at. So we have all the opportunities there when we go forward. And this ties into what we call creativity at large. I think it's not just a skill. Of course, the skills are important in it, but it's just as much about the knowledge that we have and the attitudes and the values that we work with, which are then tied together to become both competences and then into action. And action, of course, I think the crisis we have at hand show that that is really what we need to address at the moment. We do need action, and we do need new perspectives into what we can do. I think John Cahill has put it quite well, that creativity is actually the crucial variable when we want to turn knowledge into value, into something that's valuable to people, whether it's monetary value, whether it's any and every kind of value. That's where we need to be able to rethink. So that's, I think, where all of you are at the core. So if this is the challenge, and this is our opportunity to be fast in this, to actually do something, to see it as an opportunity and react rather than reactively wait for the wave to hit us and then say, ooh, we didn't know, or ooh, we're in trouble, I think it's good to look a little bit at where we are now with this issue. So what is the current situation that's happening around us? I think one thing that we will be talking a lot about later on today is that all industries are transforming. Not just the creative industries, but every single industry we have. So in that sense, we're also not alone, or we can't say that it's just us. Every single industry is in this transformation at the moment. And of course, I think the film industry or the media industry are great examples of that. There's a good piece of research here that just came out on transforming media, where we are also starting to understand where the challenges are in transforming these industries. But again, I'd lift it back to you. I mean, they're not they're not sort of transforming on their own. It's someone who's transforming them. And I think we can choose whether we want to be the impactful part in transforming these industries, or if we want to sit back and wait for something to happen. I'd much rather have all our creative capacities going into actually thinking of, okay, what do we want this industry change to be, rather than see it as something that we couldn't affect, because we can, and all of us. So that's one thing that I think is happening. Specific industries are transforming. But I think even more interestingly, I can see, particularly in a European standpoint, I think this is interesting to reflect, that we actually see leading organizations globally that are currently building their creative capacities, no matter what their industry is. So I would be really cautious in sort of putting or saying that our stuff should only go into creative industries. It's a matter of the fact that we can actually create this transformation in any industry and every industry. And they are recruiting at the moment, and we have great examples of that. So I'll just pick one, because I know this is one that you sometimes react fairly strongly to, but I think it's a good example. And that's the big international or global companies originating from the US, like Google. They have for years been pouring in resources in many of these US platform economies on building a culture of creativity in different ways. They call them different things. In the Google case, they talk about a design culture. I think it could be called a creative culture just as well. But they also say that they need this. And I think this is important when we think of the film industry, because this has largely been your role. They say that we need these cultural capacities because there are things that we cannot measure yet. And if we want to push the forefront, we need to do the things that are not yet measurable. And that is, I think, where the cultural thinking comes into the task. So this we can also see when we look at how do they actually develop something new. I think this is a good example because it's actually conducted in Europe. At the very last time we had the design and furniture fair in Milan before the COVID, they are now at Google talking about when they combine neurosciences with the human perception of it. How do they do it? And what are the ways in which they explore it? Well, to the right there, you see that they actually get the community involved in it. People are queuing to take part in this. What they have up there on the right is that they're creating these environments of different kinds of feelings, which they are measuring. And then to the left there, you can see that that's how they see the expression of it. So although we have huge masses of data, it's a creative, designed way of actually getting human emotions with it. So that graph to the left there is not a boring Excel. It's actually something that's been crafted, something which has a relevance to people. And I think this way of engaging the community and participating in new product development or in new ways of thinking is actually quite interesting. What they have also done is that they have, at Alphabet, they have a huge, they call it the Moonshot Factory, the X. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this concept. No one. This is scary. Now you're scaring me, seriously. So the X it's a big unit, but the whole place is put together for questioning what we do. That's why they call it a moonshot factory. But they actually have people together working on these questions which are completely outside of any current thinking or product offering. And I think this is really important out of a European standpoint. If this is what they do out of a corporate standpoint in the US, and then we have China, which has a lot of data, but very little maybe human sort of understanding around it. What is Europe's role? How do we create this sort of way of questioning, way of finding new solutions and ways of trying things in a way that's utterly European? The universities come into this picture, of course. I already heard you talk about this a little bit yesterday, but I think at the moment we can see a clear movement where leading universities globally are starting to integrating these creative approaches with arts into other portfolios. So we can already see it happening. And I think Aalto here is one good example of it. So I don't know how many of you know or how much you know of the background, but it was a completely new concept that was put together only 12 years ago, putting together the 3 most famous universities in the country to work in a transdisciplinary way with these questions. And I think another part of it that's really important that we talked about yesterday too, it's about actually questioning not of course we need top quality research and art, but it's also about questioning the whole ecosystem around it. What kind of society and entrepreneurship, as an example, do we want with it? So you were talking about how within the film industry, people are, small and don't always know how to start. But I think when we cross these knowledges, then that's where we actually get completely new results. And at the moment, we stand for more than 50% of all the startups in the country, so that originate from any university. So the impact of where the arts and the creative practices are coming in has already been massive. And I think that's something that we should cherish and think about how we can share it. Quite often, I'm afraid that we tend to focus on the stuff that we do in the creative fields. These are the things that we are brilliant at. These are the things. So here we've done headphones that are grown out of mushrooms to the right. We've got, the whole transformation of audiovisuals in different ways, high-end fashion, things like that. But to me, the more important part is actually that we're changing the mindsets from below. So if we think of the Aalto University, that's a combination of all different, business technologies in different areas, art, design, architecture, film, all of these. But in all of the fields, we're now saying that there's 3 mainstream thoughts that are important. We're all looking for different ways to find solutions for sustainability. Even more so, I think interesting for your point, we're saying that for any part of any field, it's important with radical creativity to actually be able to question what it is that we do. That's also the basis for any groundbreaking research, by the way, and not just the creative fields. But how can we push that mentality in a larger context? And then the third one is really the entrepreneurial mindset that we shouldn't sit here and moan, we should actually do something about it. And how can we generate that thinking forward? So I think these are sort of cornerstones of that thinking. Yesterday, you talked about how STEM is starting to become STEAM, with the A entering into this. Again, I think in Europe, we have no reason for compliancy because this is happening broadly elsewhere. So if we look at just publications from the US National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine, they are saying that the arts are important. I haven't seen enough of this yet in the European context. I clearly think we should. So I think this is another big discussion on how do we ensure that this is actually happening in the scale that we want it to happen. So if that's where we are now, what are then the things what we could do? And I think we could do at least 3 things. And 2 of those we have briefly touched on by now. I definitely think that we need to be active. We need to develop the creative industries ourselves. Things aren't going to happen for us or by anyone else. It's you guys who will do it. And it's our industries that we are changing with the work that we are doing. And I think, we should not do it. We should definitely be active in that. But the other question, which is already in a broader context than that, is that we should be, the creative aspects of doing these things should be part of any and every area. All the fields can actually benefit from these skills. And that's the second big wave. And then the third, which is even maybe more challenging, and I'll talk a little bit more about that next, is how can we rethink society? Because that's really where I think much of the thinking is. And again, that's really where Europe has its strengths. We are an area of multiple cultures, of a sort of value set that actually is possible to foster this thinking in. We should take that opportunity and make this a place where people actually want to come, where the society is such, including the cultural thinking, that it's the best place to be and to develop something new. And I think with all the crises around us, we have a better opportunity now than ever before, partly because I think everyone is in deep trouble at the moment. We may be slightly less than many others, but we have a huge amount of crucial challenges to tackle. So what are the things I think we should cherish in order to change society at large? And I was already told that I'm naive and I think too largely when I want to change the whole world, but I do think that we need to do it. So bear with me, I think, what we can carry with us doing it. So I think I was looking at all of your film reels yesterday. We are really opening up for more viewpoints, and that is really crucial in making all of us feel empathy. If I look at Europe at the moment, or society at large in any country, we get a huge divide. And we get a divide because people don't actually feel empathy to each other. So that, if anything, is somewhere where we can make, eons of change, and where I think, which we haven't maybe lifted enough as the importance of that. It's so easy that we fall back on numbers, on data, on something like that. What is empathy today, and how can we create this around us? The other thing I think that we are really good at, but we don't remember to lift quite as often, is actually that we create both meaning and experiences. What in the world of this chaos and these challenges are people looking for more than meaning and experiences? They want to share with each other. We want to actually belong somewhere and have that context. That's something that we haven't remembered to lift enough because we take it for granted. But the role in society is huge. Third area, which I see coming up all the time, but which we haven't maybe productified or monetized enough yet. We've always been a community thinker. I mean, we've like today, we've created a group of great people and we've created things together. I think this needs to scale a lot more. And today we're starting to get solutions where actually we've engaged users in different ways, we've engaged communities, and we are creating together. So the restaurant day in Finland is just a good example of that, where it was the community itself which took the threads in their hands and wanted to create a better culture to live in, and actually did something about it collectively. So that is something I think where we can clearly think in new ways. How can we generate out of this? And then I think the last one for me, this is really important, it's really the transdisciplinary collaboration. And I on purpose, we had a good discussion earlier today, I on purpose took an example which is not in the film industry, although we have many of those. But I think the Alta contest has taught us very well that when people from completely different fields collaborate with something, they find new solutions which none of them would have found alone. So this example is when fashion people start collaborating with chemists. So they actually wanted to change the whole industry, and at the moment we use a lot of cotton, which is very unsustainable. So they wanted to change their a way of inventing a completely new material and way of using it from pulp. Of course, in the Nordics we have a lot of wood, right? But if you just sell it as the raw material, the value chain is pretty low. But if you sell it as high-end fashion with a sustainable footprint, it's a completely different question. But if you talk alone with chemists or whatever else, they will show their challenges in the language of chemistry. It might not reach a broader public, but when we put together, you know, the fashion and the textile, they can actually question in a completely different way, and we get the larger societal transformations to happen. So this to the left, I just think it's a good example, because that's actually the first couple in Finland now already wearing gear that's and fashion that's made both by our students, but also made out of wood. So it's sort of a, you know, when it leaks down all that way, then we already know that it's a change that has happened in the mainstream in society in many ways. So I think that we need to be active. I do think that we have the wave coming, but I think it's more of an opportunity than a challenge. And I see a few things that we could do, but I think the most important thing, and I'm looking forward for the discussion that we're going to have today, is actually for us to see it as opportunities and for creating ways of being active in it together, and also doing it in a broad sensed way. Thank you.
Mine is not. So thank you very much, Anna, for a brilliant talk. I would now open the floor for questions or comments on the part of the audience, or on the part of the online audience also.
Did it at least get you to think? A lot of nodding. That's good. Hope I haven't shocked you too much.
Don't be shy. Well, I have a very simple question. Okay, so most of the people in the audience have a relation to film or audiovisual, yes, in a broad sense. When you talk of your understanding of creativity, do you include, because when we talk of the arts in the STEAM agenda, we sometimes don't talk of, for instance, the performative arts. How do you see the role, the specific role of film and audiovisual in this context of creativity?
Well, you're, of course, the central of all of it, right? Because you, if anyone, have the tool to talk to people in an audiovisual way which touches people, and which is actually, we had interesting discussion on this as well, it's the format of the youth. If you look at our children and our teenagers today, how do they actually express themselves? How do they communicate with each other? If we look, you know, back 100 years, they used to write things, or, you know, whatever else. Maybe they drew, but I'm not quite sure about it. But today, they communicate with each other through, you know, they might not yet be producing full-length feature films, but at least their most natural way of expressing themselves is through the audiovisual, the videos, all the games, all the animations we talked about. So I think I at least feel that for so many years we've been talking, saying that these things are important, you know, but you should understand this, and this could be interesting for you. Now we have entire generations for whom this is the norm. And we just need to make sure that we have the cutting edge thinking in it, so that it can actually inspire larger movements rather than any particular area as such.
A segment. Okay.
Exactly.
More questions? Yes?
I think you're getting.
Thank you for your presentation. I had a curiosity regarding the project you mentioned at the end, the Ion Cell project. I was wondering whether you could expand on how that came to be, because I was wondering whether it was a matter of research that gave the kickoff, or a matter of increased financial feasibility, or what was the initial motivation that brought about that project of innovation that you are advocating? Thank you.
That's a very good question. And I think there's actually three answers to it, or three parts of the answer to it. So, of course, the entire idea with Aalto was to do this kind of innovation, to get transdisciplinary work going. So initially, we actually started off with a little bit of seed funding, so that not those who we would guess wanted to collaborate would collaborate, but the people would think themselves what makes sense, and how do they, you know, what kind of things do they want to do. So in the same rounds of seed funding, for example, there was a combination of neurosciences and film, because the neuroscientists wanted to measure feelings and the film people were pro in producing them. They actually found each other again, a combination that I don't think any one of us would have done, on command. But when they wanted to do it, that was how it was generated. So that's, of course, needed a little bit of support or structures to encourage people to think in these ways. The second thing that I think has been crucial is how do you get people to meet each other? So that if they want to do these things, where do they find each other? And that, of course, we facilitated in many ways so that they would be able to collaborate. And then the third part, I think you need communications. So once you have someone who's keen on doing it and you get good starting points, you need to be able to spread the ideas so that more people can jump on the train, so that you actually get the volume out of it. So if we are now talking about transforming an entire industry in the textile area, that's not done by any group alone. But it started by really active individuals. Then you just need to get enough of the volume once it goes forward so that you can actually create the bigger societal changes.
Thank you.
There's one back there.
Thank you, Anna, for the very inspiring talk. I think you heard us talk about the making a network of expertise, making it visible, and I was wondering how you bring this knowledge and this expertise to make it visible, and how can people find each other? So I think this is the first step of working together, is really meet and find each other. How, do you have suggestions in that way? How can we make our network visible and shout, here we are, we want to collaborate and we want to work together on the big topics you introduced?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. It's also a very big question. I could talk with you, and we might be able to continue this afterwards with all of the practical things we did to get people to be able to work together. But I think the most important thing is that you do find each other in different ways. It's almost like it doesn't matter what you call the platform or the project or the concept, as long as it gives you an opportunity to actually, like today, to collaborate and to find new ways and almost to prototype the ideas you'd like to spread. Because then you can showcase what the thinking is that you would want to spread, and then you have something concrete to spread as well. Your other question was, how do you spread this knowledge to other people? And of course, I think we've used all the classical means of communication and so on, but this is also one that I would throw the ball back on you. How can we, all of us, and I don't mean just this network, but in all of Europe, how can we find new ways of sharing these ideas which actually make sense to people? They don't want to read reports. They don't want to read something that's boring, something that, everyone's time is tight. You are the people who are, pro in getting people to feel. How do we do this communication in a way that makes sense to people? I would be super happy if you would, invent new opportunities in that space.
Yes, one final question.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the inspiring presentation. It's not really a question, it's more like a vision of myself. I think that we are all creative people, and if in film, in movies, we are experienced and really good in giving hope to people. And I think that that's a really important role for all of us. Like, we can create hope for the people, for the viewers, and with our stories, we can bring joy and inspire the people in how to go on with this world and use these tools we have.
Yeah, I fully agree. I would push the envelope slightly further, though. I fully agree with the fact that you can create hope. But I think in addition to that, you can also get people to feel that they are not alone in this, that other people are experiencing similar things. I think that's the groundstone that you need before you can create the empathy. And then I think you are great at pushing new thinking. The radical stuff. Can I actually question this? Can we think about this context in a new way? So I think that's what I meant. I think you have all the tools and you're at the core of how we should be pushing society forward.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you very much for a very inspiring talk and the challenge to reach out, because I think that this idea of the example that you just gave in the end, the transdisciplinarity, it's a real challenge for us all. We will now move on to our next speaker.
Thank you.
Maria Gatta, I'll switch positions. Without further delays, and so we'll jump screens. So Maria Gatta, welcome, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Manuel. I feel I'm with you relatively because I'm far away in the north, and it is very challenging to follow Anna's presentation. That is inspiring, broad thinking, food for thought for all of us. And to bring back the discussion to my perspective as policymaker in Europe. So you will have to forgive me, and you will have to read through my langue de bois, we call it in French, of somebody who's used to discuss bureaucracy and has very few occasions like this one, for which I really thank you, Manuel, to have invited me to take a helicopter view on what we're doing and really move and think, why are we doing things? Now, your question on the audiovisual in the post-COVID area. First of all, we are in the post-COVID era and period, and we're hopefully out of the top of the crisis. But as you know, the audiovisual is still suffering very, very heavily from the consequences of this negative shock. And as every market, we adjust with the lag, and all part of the value chain are adjusting to these negative circumstances with lags that are still to come for some part of the audiovisual chain. The COVID period has triggered in Europe an enormous move forward with the recovery and fund that was adopted in the 2020, which is something unprecedented, an enormous effort at European level that was meant to help member states to come out and recover after the COVID crisis through basically two main directions of development and recovery: the digital transition and the green transition. But what for the audiovisual sector? After the recovery plan, in December 2020, Commissioner Breton presented a media and audiovisual action plan, which is a sort of blueprint of the audiovisual policy of the European Commission in the years to come. If I want to summarize what is in the media and audiovisual action plan, I think I can divide our audiovisual blueprint in three major items. The first one is we need to think European. The second axe is that we need to act locally. And the third one is that we need to compete globally. Let me first start on Think European. Last week, 2 weeks ago now, Commissioner Breton made a very interesting speech in Lille at the Festival Cérimania. In this speech, he really urged the sector to think as Europe as the native market of the European audiovisual production. We need to think European. We need to work as a European sector. We should move away from our national perspective. This is a mantra that European policies have been pursuing for the last 60 years. Probably it is even more urgent now. after the COVID crisis and following the challenges that Anna was so inspirefully depicting in her presentation. How do we think European and how do we promote European at the Commission? The first thing is clearly to create the condition to have an internal market for the audiovisual sector with harmonization of legislation, with creating a level playing field, with recognizing rights and protection for audiovisual works and for audiovisual companies. So with a set of legislative and regulatory work, we have the AVMS directive, we have a digital single act, and we have a digital single market. And of course, the copyright directive. So create the condition, the legislative condition that European actors need to be able to operate at European level. We need to create a data space in Europe, a data space that is available and accessible to all European audiovisual operators. And thirdly, we need to inject funds in the sector. Clearly, the negative shock of the COVID has been so devastating for some parts of the industry that our public money is only providing and catering for a limited amount of operators and professionals. So we really need to move beyond the simple injection of public money. We need to think about combining and attracting private investments in the audiovisual sector. And for this, we're finalizing this year this new instrument, Media Invest, that indeed seeks of using public money as a leverage for private equity injection in the sector. So reducing risk of private investments in the audiovisual sector that has often been perceived as a very risky investment for private investors, therefore using the private money to alleviate these risks. And of course, we have our traditional public injection of public funds injection in the sector, which is the Creative Europe, that again, in the aftermath of the COVID crisis, has witnessed an enormous increase in its budget in 2021 for the next 7 years, with an increase of 60% of the original budget. So these are all encouraging elements that show that the audiovisual, as pointed out in the Recovery Fund, is one of the crucial 14 ecosystems that will trigger the recovery of the European economies. It's a recognition that is very important, and some member states have included projects directed to the audiovisual in their national recovery plans. This is an acknowledgement, a political centrality of the audiovisual sector that shows the importance that the audiovisual sector has in our European economies, but also in our European ecosystem of values and cultural and societal well-being. So we need to think European. But at the same time, we need to act locally for two things. We need to reconcile, and Anna again was very inspiring on this, we need to reconcile the way we produce to our environment. And this is central for the greening priority that the Commission has set as one of the priority of the von der Leyen Commission with the Green Deal, that we need to englobate in the way the audiovisual sector produces and consumes audiovisual works. So all the aspects of the audiovisual ecosystem need to be part of this transition towards a sustainable audiovisual ecosystem. Secondly, we need to understand diversity. And I think that is really the challenge ahead of us, to give a meaningful role to diversity in our audiovisual ecosystem. For this, it's a matter of course, following the battle that has started after the Me Too, and the audiovisual has been in the front line for this clearly on gender issues. But we need to move further and understand diversity in its all intersectional approach. For this, this Media and Audiovisual Action Plan has really made diversity and gender, together with the Commission von der Leyen, as one of the priority, one of the political priority, the cross-sectoral, cross-horizontal priority of the audiovisual policy. We have this year started a quite interesting and I think very powerful campaign that really aims at bringing the attention of diversity behind the camera and not in front of the camera. Many of you probably have seen the efforts that the Commission has supported from Cannes in 2018 on the 50-50, the famous Montée des Marches of the female part of the industry, but this is in front of the camera, and this we want to bring the same quest of equality and representativeness behind the camera, focusing on professions that are clearly stereotyped for men professions or for fully able professionals. Well, it's a campaign that will last until the end of this year. The campaign is called Character, and we have done it with the collective 50-50, and really we hope that it will raise awareness of the fact that participation at all stages of the production is essential, at all stages of the audiovisual ecosystem for all part of the population is important. So again, not only gender, sexual preference, racial, social belonging, and all aspects of society. Finally, when we think about acting locally, we want to really focus on the diversity of our talents and the potential of our talents in Europe. That is clearly a goal. If we do not develop the new talents in Europe, we miss all the potential, both in artistic terms, but also in industrial terms. So we have started to really dig into the question on how to best promote our talents. And for this, we are starting now this year to make bring together cooperation of local talents at European level to really make them work together from the beginning of the creation process of the audiovisual chain. So we have this Writing European that aims at supporting directly these new talents across Europe, across all parts of Europe, bringing all the diversity and all the richness of these talents across different realities within the Union, bringing them together to create high-level works that can compete globally. Finally, global competition. You understand that investing in talents means also that we invest in authors that can keep the fruit and can keep working despite the enormous global competition with very large platforms really invading our space, our cultural space, positively sometimes, but really providing a sort of increasing the competition for the diversity of our audiovisual production in a way that we often feel that we're being completely marginalized as European audiovisual actors. So, and the interesting thing, this tension between local and global, is that in fact these global operators are invading also the diversity and the local aspect of our stories by englobating in very large chain of productions that do relate with the diversity of the context of their history, produce high quality work, and in fact really de facto are uniformizing in a way our local stories. So we need to really be investing in this high level audiovisual works that can bring and keep the talent in Europe by bringing the stories at competing at global level. So high quality with local and diverse talents. And also promoting the visibility of this work at global level. This is something that it's a challenge. It's a challenge to keep our own cultural production, European cultural production, visible and accessible and prominent in the global audiovisual market. Now, I want to conclude with referring to what Anna just said, to something that I think that in this context, university context, I think it's important. When Anna was saying we need to be human, we need to go with the unmeasurable, I also would like to throw a reflection on the fact that whilst we need to focus on the innovative and creative talents that are completely, which richness is undoubted in the European audiovisual ecosystem, we need to understand diversity starting from understanding the diversity of our film heritage and our film history in Europe. I think that only when we will understand that we're part of a tradition, that we're part of a richness, a cultural richness, and a history of filmmaking in Europe that has often taken and promoted the diversity of the filmic languages in Europe. If we understand that the otherness that we seek in the diversity is within our culture, we will be able to understand the other, and the other in a global cultural context. So I think that one of the challenges of being human is also to understand our film heritage and to make that the way we're reading the world and the way we're watching a film, we do it with the lenses of our own European filmic language. When we're going to have, when we will be able to understand the new audiovisual works with the lenses of our history, we will be able to probably to make it really, to make the diversity of the European audiovisual industry a real societal and cultural heritage and common patrimony. So with this being human and reminding our long history, I think we can really understand what innovation means and what diversity, and really reclaim the role that the European film industry has had in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. It was very interesting the way you gave an helicopter view of what's going on in Europe in terms of the audiovisual policy. It was, I must say that your understanding of the role of of education in that context of educating people on their heritage is something that we are keen of in FilmEU. It's part of our mission and it's part of what we are trying to do. We are slightly delayed, so I would open the floor for one question to Maria, and I have a very specific one I would like to add. So who wants to put forward a question? Anyone? But Maria, I have a very specific question I would like to ask you. It has to do precisely with the concept of diversity that you introduced and the issue of the role of institutions, producers, universities in fostering this diversity. My question is, when you talk of talent and nurturing talent, for us, universities, this is, and in the emails we exchanged, I already talked about this because this is something we've been dwelling with for many years, is how can we fill that gap? We universities can help the Commission, the policymakers, in filling that gap between the moment a student, a young creative professional finishes his degree and the moment he has a stable job. Let's put it very simple like that. So my question is, you mentioned the recent initiatives the Commission is taking in terms of funding young talents. My question is, will there be specific initiatives, or are they sort of, either at European level or locally, namely in the context of the resilience funds, that will somehow or can somehow help in bridging this gap? And in particular, what do you think universities can do via their collaboration with the media program in fostering the emergence of the young talents we know we need in order to sustain the audiovisual European industry?
Thank you, Manuel, for posing this question that has been, I think, one of the main questions of the Creative Europe program for the last 20 years, but it's becoming more and more urgent exactly now when we see that talents are often taken away from their humus in Europe and move away for other big players. Normally, the part of, there is a clear division between the initial education to film that is competence of the member states, and the part where we act as Creative Europe program with our training schemes, that it's really developing skills within professionals. So this division is unavoidable. We will not be able to really intervene on what is competence of the member states and what is the European dimension of skills development for the audiovisual sector. This we will not move away. Yet, I mentioned this pilot project that we're starting, that is this Writing European, for which we're closing the call now and we're evaluating the first results this year. And there we have really insisted that the transdisciplinary dimension of this co-writing that we're promoting for talents across Europe is prominent in the project. So we're really looking at ways in which university, our training projects, but also leading writers, also producers at a certain moment, but creating sort of writers' rooms that bring together talent at a different stage of their career. So really leading talents or established writers, but also with young talents, with a cross-fertilization among the generation of the European creators, but also with universities, bringing into the project this some scientific approach on knowledge and on data, neuroscience, indeed, as Anna was mentioning. So this kind of interdisciplinary approach in which I think universities can play a very interesting role. We have examples among our training projects that have really that have given us hope that if we can really invest on this kind of creative hubs, I don't know how to call it in a way that really insist on the creative and artistic and also the transmission aspect of a co-writing project. So we are embarking in this now, again, with all the difficulties of a public institution as the Commission, that really needs to have some established beneficiary and cannot really go into really putting money into really young talents, because we have constrictions on how to use the public funding, clearly. So it's a path that we start to walk. It is difficult, but I think it's the challenge for the entire industry, and indeed it's a part in which we can play. I feel that we can play, and I have hope with this project. It will clarify the way we can best intervene to really discover and nurture new talents.
Very much, Maria. We look forward for that call, namely because you probably don't know this, but this European University inception was many, many years ago under media program funding in a joint project that had the interesting name of Ensemble. So I think we look forward for those opportunities. I would once again like to thank both Maria Gatta and Anna Valtonen for their very inspiring talks. It has been, I think, a brilliant moment of sharing, and I think that there are a lot of ideas that have been put forward that not only help us in framing the challenges we face, the waves that are coming, but also help us in better understanding the opportunities out there, namely in terms of collaboration, in terms of funding, and also in terms of challenges. And the afternoon will precisely be dedicated to challenges. So we will now break for a quick lunch. We will meet again here at 2 o'clock for a brief presentation of the challenge model that we are trying to implement in FilmEU. Then at 2:30, we will start with the welcome speech of the Secretary of State, and then quickly move to our 3 very intensive roundtables during the afternoon. I would like to conclude by not only thanking our speakers, but also the audience in the room and the audience online for their participation. It has been a very fruitful morning, and I'll see you all after lunch. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, Maria, and thank you, Anna.
A special thanks to our guests and participants. Now we have a lunch break. We will be back at 2 p.m. Thank you for watching.
I just wanna chill. I don't need a sign. Things are not the same. Forget the ring of blame. Take your rings and your bracelets. It is time, we just move on. It's too much, so just embrace this. Make it yours, cause I'll be gone. I don't want your lies, you be in it twice. And you're looking for your eyes, and I roll the dice. I've been feeling highs, all you wanna slice. Here is a surprise, you ain't getting the spice. Okay,